Richard Nixon was a man of contradictions. He was brilliant but insecure, powerful yet paranoid, and a master of political maneuvering who ultimately engineered his own downfall. While his presidency was marked by groundbreaking achievements, such as opening diplomatic relations with China and signing key environmental laws, it was overshadowed by the Watergate scandal, which led to his resignation in disgrace. In his final days in office, as the walls of the White House seemed to close in on him, Nixon reportedly did something both strange and deeply revealing. He talked to portraits. It wasn't just a one-time occurrence. According to multiple accounts from White House staffers, Nixon, in the late hours of the night, would roam the halls of the White House, sometimes with a drink in hand, engaging in one-sided conversations with the paintings of past presidents. His favorite subjects: Abraham Lincoln, Dwight Eisenhower, and John F. Kennedy. Each represented something Nixon admired or resented, and in his moments of solitude, he turned to them as if seeking advice, absolution, or perhaps just someone who wouldn't argue back. The idea of Nixon confiding in portraits may seem bizarre, even comical, but it offers a glimpse into the immense psychological pressure he was under. By 1974, Watergate was consuming his presidency. Investigations, leaked recordings, and betrayals from his closest aides had left him increasingly isolated. His approval ratings had plummeted, Congress was preparing impeachment proceedings, and his once loyal allies were abandoning him. With few people left to trust, he turned to the silent faces of history for comfort. Lincoln, whose portrait famously hangs in the White House, was one of Nixon's favorite historical figures. Both men had faced political adversity, though Nixon's troubles were largely of his own making. One can imagine Nixon, standing before Lincoln's solemn, wise face, lamenting his fate. Did he ask Lincoln how to survive a crisis? Did he beg for advice? Or was he hoping for some ghostly reassurance that he, too, would be remembered kindly in the end? Dwight Eisenhower, Nixon's former boss and a towering figure in American politics, was another frequent conversation partner. As vice president under Eisenhower, Nixon had long sought his approval, but Ike had never been entirely comfortable with his ambitious, sometimes ruthless protege. By the time Nixon was crumbling under Watergate, Eisenhower had been dead for 5 years, but his portrait still hung in the White House. It's easy to imagine Nixon, drink in hand, standing before Ike's image, apologizing for disappointing him or angrily defending his actions. Perhaps the most ironic of all was Nixon speaking to John F. Kennedy's portrait. Nixon and Kennedy had been rivals since their early days in Congress, culminating in the famously close and controversial 1960 presidential election, which Nixon lost. He had long resented JFK's easy charm and the public's adoration of him. But in his final days in office, as the world turned against him, did Nixon finally see Kennedy as a kindred spirit? Someone who had also suffered under the weight of the presidency, though for very different reasons. Reports of Nixon's late-night ramblings paint a picture of a man consumed by regret, paranoia, and a desperate need to be understood. Aides noted that he would often wander the White House in a daze, muttering to himself, sometimes lost in a drunken stupor. There were nights when he ordered military units on high alert, fearing an impending coup that never existed. There were moments when he sat alone in the Oval Office, replaying his own secret recordings, hearing his downfall in his own voice. It wasn't just the weight of scandal that haunted him, it was the realization that history was about to judge him, and not kindly. As he looked at the faces of past presidents, he must have wondered how he would be remembered among them. Would he be the strong leader who ended the Vietnam War and opened China? Or would he forever be the man who broke the trust of the American people? The night before his resignation, Nixon gathered his staff and family for a painful farewell. In his final speech as president, he spoke of resilience, of never giving up, and of his mother's unwavering faith in him. It was a deeply emotional moment, but by then, his fate was sealed. The next morning, he boarded the helicopter that would take him away from the White House, flashing one last awkward smile before disappearing into history. Did he speak to the portraits one last time before he left? Did he give Lincoln a nod of understanding? Did he tell Eisenhower that he had tried his best? Did he stand before Kennedy and wonder how things might have been different? We will never know exactly what Nixon said to those silent faces. But the image of a disgraced president, pacing the halls of the White House, whispering to the ghosts of history, is a fitting end to one of the most complex figures in American politics. It is the image of a man who, in his final days of power, had no one left to listen, except the presidents who came before him. Watching silently from the walls.